Year 2 of the war began with fire raining from the sky. The Velkari had grown tired of guerrilla warfare and resistance fighters. High Executor Thrain, a warlord who had conquered 40 worlds over his 300-year military career, arrived to take personal command. His solution to the human problem was simple: terror. If they hide among civilians, then civilians are combatants, he declared. Burn their cities, destroy their farms, make them beg for mercy. On New Manchester, an industrial world of 4 million people, Thrain demonstrated his methods. When resistance fighters destroyed a Velkari supply depot, he ordered the orbital bombardment of an entire city district. 30,000 people died in the flames. He expected the humans to break. Instead, something else happened. On Earth, Fleet Admiral Una watched the footage from New Manchester. She was humanity's supreme naval commander, chosen because she had never lost a war game simulation. She was brilliant, ruthless when necessary, and deeply aware of how outmatched humanity was. How long until the fleet is ready? She asked her staff. 6 more months for full deployment. We have 300 ships ready now. Another 700 under construction. Una studied the tactical display. The Velkari had committed roughly 2,000 ships to the human front. They still had numerical and technological superiority, but she had been studying their tactics for a year now. She had found patterns, weaknesses. We don't wait 6 months, she decided. We strike now with what we have. Her officers looked shocked. Admiral, we're still outnumbered 6-1. Numbers don't matter if we're smart about this, Una said. The Velkari fight like they've been fighting for 3,000 years. Same formation, same tactics. They've forgotten how to adapt because they never had to. That's their weakness. On New Busan, Sora's resistance had evolved. They were no longer just farmers with rifles. Colonel Daeho had sent military trainers, and Earth Command was coordinating resistance operations across all occupied worlds. They had become a real army. Today we liberate the capital, Sora told her force of 2,000 fighters. The Velkari think we're beaten. Let's show them how wrong they are. The attack came at dawn. Resistance fighters hit 6 Velkari bases simultaneously. They used captured enemy weapons, improvised explosives, and tactics learned from Earth's special forces. The Velkari garrison, already demoralized after months of guerrilla attacks, began to fall apart. Commander Taman watched his orderly occupation collapse into chaos. High Executor Thrain's brutality had not broken the humans. It had united them. Colonies that barely spoke to each other before the war now worked together seamlessly. Earth itself had put aside centuries of political divisions. The Velkari had created the very thing they needed to avoid: a unified, angry enemy with nothing left to lose. We need reinforcements, Taman told Thrain. The situation is deteriorating. You're weak, Thrain snarled. I've conquered 40 worlds. I know how to break a species. More terror, more brutality. That's the answer. But Taman was beginning to doubt. He had spent 200 years following the Dominion's ways. Now, for the first time, he wondered if those ways were wrong. Dr. Junho worked in a secret facility on Titan, Saturn's largest moon. He led humanity's reverse engineering program. They had captured 3 Velkari ships during the past year, and his team had torn them apart to learn their secrets. We can't match their technology, he told visiting officers. They're centuries ahead of us. But we can steal it. Look at this. He showed them a new type of weapon, Velkari plasma lances. We've figured out how to build them. They're not as efficient as the Velkari versions, but they work. We're fitting them on all new ships. The officers looked at the weapon in awe. For the first time, human ships would match Velkari firepower. There's more, Junho continued. We've cracked their shield frequency. We can calibrate our weapons to punch through easier. It's not a huge advantage, but every bit helps. Admiral Una's fleet assembled at Jupiter's orbit. 300 human warships, the largest fleet humanity had ever built. They were smaller than Velkari dreadnoughts, but they carried new weapons and new tactics. More importantly, they carried Earth's hope. We're calling this Operation Prometheus, Una told her captains. We're going to steal fire from the gods. Target is the Velkari fleet at New Manchester. Intelligence says they have 400 ships there. We're going to hit them with everything we have. Captain Minho commanded a squadron of 30 frigates. Each ship carried 1,000 combat drones. His mission was to overwhelm the Velkari point defenses and create openings for the larger ships. Remember, he told his crews, we're not trying to slug it out with them. We swarm, we overwhelm, We make them react to us instead of thinking. Ensign Hyun had been promoted to lieutenant. He now commanded his own frigate, the Resilient. He was still young and sometimes scared, but he had learned how to fight. He had learned that the Valkyrie were not invincible. The human fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. The Valkyrie fleet at New Manchester had been expecting an attack, but not this many ships. High Executor Thrain had assumed the humans were still weak, still building. He was wrong. All ships attack formation, Admiral Yuna commanded. Launch all drones! The space around New Manchester filled with 300,000 combat drones. They streaked toward the Valkyrie fleet like a swarm of angry insects. The Valkyrie point defense systems opened fire, destroying thousands of drones. But there were too many. They kept coming. Minho watched his tactical display as the drones reached the enemy fleet. All ships fire plasma lances. The new weapons lit up the darkness. Blue beams of superheated plasma shot across space, slamming into Valkyrie shields. The shields held, but they flickered. They were being damaged. Second wave, target the damaged ships, Yuna ordered. The battle became chaos. Valkyrie ships tried to respond with their usual coordinated tactics, but the sheer number of targets overwhelmed them. For every drone they destroyed, 5 more got through. Human frigates darted in and out, firing and retreating before the enemy could respond. On the planet below, Sora's forces heard the battle in orbit. They launched their own attack, hitting Valkyrie ground forces while they were distracted by the space battle. High Executor Thrain commanded his fleet from his flagship, the Destroyer of Worlds. He could not believe what he was seeing. The humans were supposed to be beaten, frightened, easy prey. Instead, they were fighting with coordination and skill he had never seen from them before. All ships concentrate fire on their capital ships, he ordered. Destroy their leadership. But Admiral Yuna had anticipated this. The human capital ships were hanging back, protecting each other. The frigates and drones took the losses instead. Ships were dying, but the plan was working. Drone Wave 3, target enemy command ships, Yuna ordered. 10,000 drones changed course, all heading for the largest Valkyrie vessels. The enemy point defense couldn't stop them all. Explosions blossomed across the hulls of 3 command ships. One lost power and began to drift. Another exploded spectacularly. The Valkyrie fleet began to lose coordination. Without their command ships, individual captains had to make their own decisions. They weren't trained for that. The Dominion had spent 3,000 years teaching its officers to follow orders, not to think creatively. Commander Taemin watched the battle from his headquarters on New Busan. He saw human tactics that were nothing like their earlier desperate attacks. They had learned. They had adapted. They had become dangerous. On Earth, people watched the battle on their screens. For the first time since the war began, they saw human ships winning. They saw Valkyrie vessels exploding. They saw their enemy bleeding. The Battle of New Manchester lasted 14 hours. When it ended, 160 human ships had been destroyed, but 230 Valkyrie ships were gone. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Valkyrie Dominion had lost a major fleet engagement. High Executor Thrain survived, but his flagship was crippled. As he evacuated to another ship, he understood something that shocked him. The humans were not weak. They had been learning, adapting, preparing. Every guerrilla attack had taught them something. Every small victory had given them confidence. The Dominion had been fighting the same way for millennia because it always worked. Now they faced an enemy that refused to fight that way, an enemy that changed tactics every battle, an enemy that turned weakness into strength. On New Manchester, Sora's forces liberated the capital city. Valkyrie troops, demoralized by the defeat in orbit and cut off from supplies, began to surrender. For the first time, humans took Valkyrie prisoners. Admiral Yuna stood on her bridge, exhausted but victorious. They had paid a terrible price. 20,000 crew members dead, but they had proven something crucial. They could win. Send a message to all human worlds, she ordered. Tell them we won. Tell them the Valkyrie can be beaten. Across human space, the news spread like wildfire. New Manchester was free. The Valkyrie fleet was broken. After a year of defeats and occupation and terror, humanity had struck back. Dr. Junho's team worked overtime analyzing the wreckage. They recovered Valkyrie technology from the destroyed ships. New weapons, new shields, new engines. Each piece brought them closer to matching their enemy. Year 3 of the war changed everything. The Velkari Dominion, stung by defeat at New Manchester, sent 3,000 ships to crush humanity once and for all. High Executor Thrain commanded them personally, determined to erase the shame of his earlier loss. But 3,000 ships meant pulling forces from other parts of the Dominion. Worlds that had been occupied for centuries saw their garrison forces reduced, and the subject species noticed. Dr. Nari worked in a facility on Mars, developing something new. She wasn't a weapons engineer like Junho. She was a psychologist and communications expert. Her weapon was information. "We're broadcasting to every Velkari-occupied world," she explained to Admiral Yuna, telling them what happened at New Manchester, telling them the Dominion can lose, telling them they can be free. "Will it work?" Yuna asked. "It already is. We're detecting uprisings on 17 worlds. The Velkari have to divert ships to deal with them. Every ship they send to crush a rebellion is one less ship we face." Specialist Quan was part of humanity's deep infiltration program. He and his team had spent 6 months traveling to the Velkari home system, disguised as merchants from a neutral species. It was insanely dangerous, but the intelligence they could gather was invaluable. They established a network of spy satellites and listening posts. They identified the locations of Velkari shipyards, supply depots, and command centers. For the first time, humans knew what the heart of the enemy empire looked like. "Sending data now," Quan transmitted on an encrypted channel. "Velkara Prime has minimal defenses. They never thought anyone would reach their home system." Admiral Yuna received the intelligence with satisfaction. They're about to learn a painful lesson about assuming you're safe. The human fleet had grown to 700 ships. They weren't as advanced as Velkari vessels, but they had closed the technology gap. Dr. Junho's reverse engineering program had given them plasma weapons, improved shields, and better engines. More importantly, human crews had learned how to fight. Captain Minho now commanded a carrier that launched 3,000 combat drones. He stood on his bridge, looking at the tactical display. The Velkari fleet was gathering at the human colony world of Armstrong Station, preparing for what they expected to be a final, crushing blow. "They think we'll defend Armstrong," Minho said to his first officer, "but Admiral Yuna has a different plan." The plan was bold and risky. While the Velkari concentrated their forces at Armstrong, the bulk of the human fleet would strike at 3 different targets simultaneously. They would hit Velkari supply lines, liberate occupied worlds, and attack deep into Dominion space. On New Busan, Sora commanded a combined force of human resistance fighters and alien warriors from 3 other species. News of humanity's success had inspired other conquered peoples. They were beginning to rise up against their Velkari masters. "Today we don't just fight for humanity," Sora told her troops. "We fight for everyone the Dominion has crushed. We fight for freedom." High Executor Thrain was confident as his massive fleet approached Armstrong Station. The station had a population of 500,000 and was a major industrial center. Its destruction would cripple human ship production. But when his fleet arrived, they found the station defended by only 30 old frigates. Where was the human fleet? "It's a trap," his tactical officer warned. "No," Thrain said. "They're simply weak. They can't defend all their worlds. Destroy the station." He had no idea that at that moment, Admiral Yuna's fleet was attacking 6 different Velkari targets across 3 systems. The attack was coordinated down to the second. At the Crimson Nebula, 300 human ships ambushed a Velkari supply convoy. At the liberated world of New Manchester, Admiral Yuna herself led an assault on the Velkari regional headquarters. And deep in Dominion space, 50 heavily armed human ships emerged from faster-than-light travel near a major Velkari shipyard. The Velkari were caught completely off guard. For 3,000 years, enemies had defended their homes and waited to be attacked. No one had ever struck at the Dominion itself. The idea was unthinkable, until humanity did it. Specialist Quan's intelligence proved accurate. The shipyard he had identified was poorly defended, with only a dozen patrol ships. The human fleet destroyed them quickly and then turned their weapons on the shipyard itself. It was huge, capable of building 100 ships at once. "Target the construction bays," the fleet commander ordered. "Nothing left but debris." The shipyard died in fire. With it, the Dominion lost months of ship production. But more importantly, they lost something psychological. No Valkyrie world was safe anymore. At the Crimson Nebula, the battle was fiercer. The supply convoy was protected by a fleet of 200 warships, but Captain Minho's carrier group knew what they were doing now. They used the nebula's dense gas clouds for cover, striking and vanishing before the enemy could respond. "Deploy Drone Swarm 4, Minho ordered. "Target their ammunition ships." When ammunition ships exploded, they exploded spectacularly. 3 massive detonations lit up the nebula. The Valkyrie fleet found itself running low on missiles while still under heavy attack. Admiral Yuna's assault on the regional headquarters was personal. This facility had coordinated the occupation of New Manchester. From here, High Executor Thrain had ordered the bombardment that killed 30,000 civilians. "I want that base destroyed," she told her fleet. "No mercy." The orbital defenses were strong, but Yuna had brought enough firepower. Her ships hammered the base with plasma lances and missiles until its shields failed. Then the base itself vanished in a nuclear fireball. At Armstrong Station, High Executor Thrain realized something was wrong. Reports flooded in from across Dominion space. Human attacks, rebellions, supply lines cut. His rear areas were in chaos. "Recall all forces," he ordered. "We need to defend the core systems," but it was too late. His fleet was committed to the attack on Armstrong. The 30 human frigates defending the station fought with desperate courage, buying time. They knew they were going to die, but they also knew their sacrifice mattered. 29 frigates were destroyed, but they held long enough for the civilian population to evacuate. When Thrain's forces finally took the station, it was empty. A hollow victory that had cost him 3 days he couldn't afford to lose. The Battle of Crimson Nebula lasted 2 days. When it ended, the Valkyrie supply fleet was destroyed. Captain Minho had lost 90 ships, but the enemy had lost all 200 of theirs. Without supplies, Valkyrie forces across 3 sectors would have to withdraw or face starvation. Worse news came for the Dominion. The Council of 7 received reports that 15 subject species had risen in open rebellion. Some had been conquered centuries ago but had never forgotten their freedom. Now, seeing the Valkyrie bleed, they believed they could win it back. The council met in emergency session. For the first time in millennia, they faced a real crisis. Their empire was 3,000 star systems, but it was held together by fear and reputation. What happened when that fear disappeared? "We need to negotiate," one counselor suggested. "Never," another shouted. "We do not negotiate with inferior species." But the first counselor was old and wise. "Pride has already cost us dearly. These humans are not like others we've conquered. They adapt, they learn, they refuse to surrender. How many more ships must we lose?" High Executor Thrain refused to accept defeat. He still had over 2,000 ships. He would crush the human fleet, then deal with the rebellions. He gathered his forces and hunted for Admiral Yuna's main fleet. Intelligence said they were near the dying star system, a red giant sun surrounded by dead planets. He would trap them there and end this war. What he didn't know was that Yuna wanted to be found. She was leading him into the largest ambush in human history. The dying star system had been seeded with thousands of mines, hidden weapons platforms, and automated drone launchers. When Thrain's fleet arrived, they found Yuna's 500 ships waiting. "All ships, defensive formation," Thrain ordered. He had the numbers. He would win. Then the trap was sprung. Mines activated throughout the system. Weapons platforms revealed themselves. Drones launched by the tens of thousands, and 3 human colonies that Thrain thought were undefended suddenly lit up with missile fire. The Valkyrie fleet found itself surrounded and taking fire from all directions. Ships exploded. Formation broke down. Panic spread through the fleet as captains realized they had sailed into a killing field. "Retreat," Thrain ordered. "All ships retreat." But retreating through a minefield was deadly. Ships collided trying to escape. Others triggered mines and exploded. The orderly Valkyrie fleet became a mob trying to survive. Captain Minho's carrier group blocked one escape route. "No mercy," he said quietly. remembering the friends he had lost at New Busan. His drones tore into fleeing enemy ships. High Executor Thrane's flagship took a direct hit from a weapons platform. His shields failed. Secondary explosions rippled through the ship. As crew members died around him, Thrane realized the truth he had refused to see. The humans had outplayed him. They had turned his strength into weakness, leading him exactly where they wanted. They had proven to be better strategists, better warriors, better survivors. His ship exploded. Thrane died, still refusing to believe that the mighty Dominion could lose to primitives. Year 5 of the war arrived, and the galaxy looked very different. The Valkyrie Dominion, which had ruled nearly 1,000 worlds, now controlled barely 300. Rebellions burned across their former empire. Subject species that had been enslaved for centuries fought for their freedom, inspired by humanity's example. On Valkara Prime, the Council of Seven was no longer united. 3 counselors wanted to negotiate peace with humanity. 3 wanted to fight to the last ship. The first counselor held the deciding vote, and he was old and tired. Commander Taman stood before the council, giving his report. He had been fighting humans for 5 years. He knew them better than anyone. They have 700 ships now, he said. Not as many as we have, but their technology has caught up to ours. More importantly, their tactics are superior. They adapt faster than we do. They take risks we never would, and they absolutely refuse to surrender. Then we fight harder, one of the hardline counselors said. With what? Taman asked. Half our fleet is dealing with rebellions. The other half is exhausted from 5 years of constant war. Our shipyards are bombed. Our supply lines are cut. And the humans are not alone anymore. They've allied with 40 freed species. The first counselor looked at Taman with ancient eyes. Do you believe we can win? Taman thought about everything he had seen. The resistance fighters who never stopped. The fleet that grew stronger with every battle. The admiral who outthought every Valkyrie commander. No, he said finally. We cannot win. Not anymore. Admiral Yuna received the first peace message with suspicion. The Valkyrie had started this war with bombardments and threats. They had killed millions of humans. Now they wanted to talk? But Ambassador Hana, who had tried to prevent the war 5 years ago, urged patience. We can destroy them, she said. But at what cost? How many more of our people have to die? If they're willing to surrender, shouldn't we listen? Colonel Deho disagreed. They're buying time. Let them surrender, and in 20 years they'll come back stronger. The only way to be safe is to finish this. The human leadership was divided. Some wanted total victory. Others wanted peace. The debate raged for weeks. Dr. Jiwon provided analysis from her studies. The Valkyrie Empire is collapsing, she reported. Even if we stopped fighting today, they would continue to lose worlds to rebellions. The question is not whether they're defeated, they are. The question is what we do with our victory. Captain Minho had strong feelings about this. He remembered the 4 frigates that died at New Busan. He remembered friends who would never go home. Part of him wanted revenge, but he also remembered rescuing Valkyrie survivors after battles. They were not monsters. They were soldiers following orders just like humans. Some had been conscripted. Some had no choice. If we slaughter them all, he told Admiral Yuna, we become what they were. We become conquerors instead of defenders. Sora's perspective was different. She had fought them for 5 years on occupied worlds. She had seen the atrocities they committed. They killed 30,000 civilians on New Manchester, she said. They burned our homes. They enslaved our people. And now they want mercy? Yes, Ambassador Hana replied. Because mercy is what separates us from them. We didn't start this war, but we can choose how it ends. On Valkara Prime, Commander Taman led a faction of Valkyrie who wanted peace. Many younger officers followed him. They were tired of dying for an empire that treated other species like property. But there were hardliners too, led by General Voran. He believed surrender was unthinkable. The Dominion was eternal. It could not bow to anyone. We still have 800 warships, Voran told his followers. We can make them pay for every system. We can drag this war on for decades and lose everything, Taman replied. Don't you see? We've already lost. The empire is gone. All we're deciding now is how many more Valkyrie die before we admit it. The argument became a confrontation. General Voran tried to stage a coup, attempting to seize control of the government and continue the war. But most of the military followed Taman. The coup failed. Voran died fighting rather than surrender, shot by his own soldiers who were tired of war. With the hardliners defeated, the Council of Seven authorized peace negotiations. They sent Commander Taman as their representative. If anyone could negotiate with the humans, it was the warrior who respected them. The negotiations took place on a neutral station at the edge of human space. Admiral Yuna represented Earth's military. Ambassador Hana represented the diplomatic corps. Colonel Deho attended as well, still arguing for harsh terms. Commander Taman arrived with a small delegation. He walked into the conference room and faced the people he had been fighting for 5 years. For a long moment, no one spoke. "I am Commander Taman of the Velkari people," he said finally. "I come to discuss the terms of our surrender." Those words changed everything. Surrender. The Dominion had never surrendered to anyone in 3,000 years. The negotiations were difficult. Colonel Deho wanted the Velkari completely disarmed. "They can't be trusted," he insisted. "If we take everything from them," Hana replied, "we create another war 20 years from now. They need to be able to defend themselves but not threaten others." Dr. Junho suggested technology sharing. "They have science we don't. We have innovations they never developed. If we work together, both species benefit." Taman listened to the humans debate. They argued passionately, but they also listened to each other. It reminded him that humans were not a hive mind. They were individuals who disagreed and compromised and found solutions together. "What do you want from us?" he asked finally. Admiral Yuna looked at him. "We want assurances this never happens again. We want justice for war crimes. We want reparations for the worlds you destroyed. And we want the Dominion dissolved. No more empire. No more conquest." "That is a heavy price," Taman said. "Yes," Yuna replied, "but it's lighter than the alternative. We have 700 ships in orbit around your homeworld right now. We could destroy Velkara Prime, millions would die. Is that what you want?" Taman thought about his people. The Velkari were warriors, proud and ancient, but pride had cost them everything. "Perhaps it was time to learn something new." "No," he said. "I do not want that." "What are your terms?" The Treaty of New Hope was signed after 3 months of negotiation. The terms were harsh but not impossible. The Velkari Dominion would be dissolved. The Velkari people would keep their homeworld and 10 colony systems. All other territory would be freed. The Velkari military would be reduced to 300 ships for defensive purposes only. They would submit to inspections for 10 years. War crimes tribunals would be established to judge those responsible for atrocities on both sides. The Velkari would pay reparations to the worlds they had damaged, spread over 50 years. Technology. Sharing would occur between humans and Velkari for mutual benefit. All species in the former Dominion would have the right to self-determination. Captain Minho was assigned to oversee the demilitarization. He watched as proud Velkari warships were dismantled or converted to civilian use. Some Velkari resented it. Others seemed relieved. The war was over. They could go home. He met Taman during one inspection. The Velkari commander had been stripped of his rank but worked with the transition government. "Do you hate us?" Taman asked. Minho thought about the question. "I did," he said honestly. "But hate is exhausting. I'm tired of war. I want to build something instead of destroying." Sora supervised the liberation of occupied worlds. Millions of beings from dozens of species celebrated their freedom. It was overwhelming and beautiful. She found it strange that 5 years of fighting had led to this. Peace. It didn't feel like victory. Too many friends were dead. Too many lives destroyed. But it was better than continuing to fight. Dr. Jiwan worked with Velkari scientists on technology exchange. She discovered they were not so different from human researchers. They were curious, dedicated, passionate about their work. The war had been about power and territory. Science could be about something better. Specialist Quan was part of the team that investigated war crimes. They found evidence of atrocities committed by both sides. Humans had done terrible things too in the heat of battle. Justice required acknowledging all of it. The trials were difficult. Some Velkari officers were sentenced for ordering the bombardment of civilian populations. Some human officers were sentenced for executing prisoners. No one was happy, but that meant the justice was probably fair. 10 years after the Treaty of New Hope, the galaxy looked very different. The Velkari were rebuilding, focusing on trade and culture instead of conquest. Former subject species had formed a loose confederation for mutual defense. Humans had emerged as a major galactic power, respected and sometimes feared. Admiral Yuna, now retired, gave a speech at the dedication of a memorial to those who died in the war. "We didn't want this war," she said, "but when it came, we fought with everything we had. Not because we loved violence, but because we loved our freedom. We taught the galaxy that humans will not be bullied, we will not surrender, and we will not become monsters to defeat monsters." Commander Taman, now an advisor to the new Velkari government, attended the ceremony. He placed flowers at the memorial, honoring both human and Velkari dead. A human veteran approached him. "Why did you come?" she asked. "Because they deserve to be remembered." 3 months had passed since New Busan fell. Commander Taman stood in what used to be the colony's city hall, now converted into Velkari military headquarters. He stared at casualty reports that made no sense. His occupation force had lost 37 soldiers in the past week alone. Not to another military attack. The humans had no military left on this world. They were losing soldiers to ghosts. "Explain this to me again," he said to his security chief. The officer looked uncomfortable. "The humans refuse to cooperate. We control the cities, but the countryside is hostile. Supply convoys are attacked. Our patrols disappear. Yesterday, someone destroyed our main power generator." "Then hunt them down," Taman snapped. "We try, Commander, but they vanish. They know this terrain better than we do. They hide in caves and forests and abandoned buildings. When we search one area, they attack somewhere else." Taman had never encountered this before. Every other species they conquered either fought an open battle and lost or surrendered peacefully. These humans did neither. They had lost the battle but refused to accept defeat. In the mountains outside the city, Sora checked her weapons. She had been a school teacher before the invasion. Now she led a resistance cell of 40 fighters. Some were former colonial defense volunteers. Others were miners, farmers, and shop owners who had learned to fight. They had no fancy weapons. Most of their guns were hunting rifles or tools modified for combat. They made explosives from mining chemicals. They used their knowledge of the terrain to set ambushes, and they refused to give up. "The convoy will come through the pass at dawn," her scout reported. 6 trucks, 2 armored vehicles. Sora studied the map. "We'll hit them here where the road narrows. Plant the explosives on both sides. After the blast, hit them fast and pull back before reinforcements arrive." Her fighters moved into position as the sun began to rise. They had done this 12 times before. Each time they learned something new about the enemy. Each time they got better. On Earth, Colonel Deho was briefing the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He was a veteran of the resource wars, decades of fighting over water and rare minerals before humanity reached the stars. He understood asymmetric warfare. "The Velkari are winning traditional battles," he explained, "but they're stretched thin. They've occupied 4 of our worlds now, and it's costing them. Every day they stay, they lose soldiers and equipment. We need to make this expensive for them." "What do you propose?" the chairman asked. "We changed tactics. No more frontal assaults. We use small units, hit-and-run attacks, sabotage. We make them paranoid. We make them waste resources chasing shadows. And while they're distracted, we rebuild our fleet." The Earth Defense Force had been devastated in the initial attacks, but humanity's industrial capacity was vast. Shipyards across 7 worlds were working day and night building new warships. They wouldn't match Velkari technology, but they would have numbers. Captain Minho had been rescued by a human transport ship after drifting in his escape pod for 6 days. He was recovering on Armstrong Station when Colonel Deho's fleet arrived. The colonel wanted to meet the officers who had faced the Velkari in combat. "Tell me about their tactics," Deho said. Minho pulled up tactical displays. "They rely on overwhelming firepower and superior technology. Their command ships coordinate everything. They're disciplined and efficient. But they're also predictable. They always use the same formations, the same attack patterns. Predictable is good," Deho said. "Predictable we can counter." Dr. Jiwan had made it to Armstrong Station as well. She spent her days analyzing the data she had saved from New Busan. She studied the Velkari ship movements, their energy signatures, their communication patterns. "Look at this," she told Minho. "Every ship in their fleet is constantly talking to the command vessel. If we could take out their command ships, the others might be paralyzed." Minho considered this. It's a weakness, but getting close enough to target command ships would be suicide. "Maybe not," Jiwan said. What if we didn't have to get close? What if we sent drones packed with explosives? Small, fast, hard to target. We could sacrifice drones instead of ships. Colonel Deho arrived with a fleet of 30 new frigates. They weren't as advanced as the ones the Valkyrie had destroyed, but they had incorporated some new ideas. Smaller, faster, with better point defense systems, and they carried hundreds of combat drones. "We're going to New Busan," Deho announced. "We're going to help the resistance and bloody the Valkyrie nose." At New Busan, Sora's resistance had grown. Word of their success had spread, and more colonists joined every day. They now numbered 300 fighters, but they were running low on supplies and ammunition. Then one night, supply pods started falling from the sky. They contained weapons, explosives, medicine, and food. A message came with them from Colonel Deo. "Hold on. Help is coming." Sora smiled for the first time in months. They weren't alone anymore. Commander Taman received urgent news. A human fleet had entered the system. Not a large fleet, only 30 ships, but they weren't attacking the planet. Instead, they were striking his support vessels and logistics bases in the asteroid belt. "Deploy attack squadrons," he ordered. "Destroy them." But the human ships didn't fight the way he expected. They used hit-and-run tactics, attacking and then running away before his forces could respond. When he sent ships to chase them, they led his forces into minefields hidden among the asteroids. Ensign Hyun was aboard one of the new frigates. It was his first combat mission, and he was terrified. But he followed his orders, piloting a squad of combat drones toward a Valkyrie destroyer. "Remember," his commander said, "target their bridge. One shot, then get out." Hyun sent the drones streaking toward the enemy ship. The Valkyrie point defense systems destroyed most of them, but 3 got through. They slammed into the destroyer's bridge and exploded. The ship went dark, drifting without control. "Target destroyed," Hyun shouted. Around him, other drone operators were having similar success. The Valkyrie hadn't adapted to this new threat. Their defensive systems were designed to stop missiles and energy weapons, not swarms of small, fast-moving drones. On the planet's surface, Sora's fighters launched coordinated attacks. With supplies from orbit, they struck 5 Valkyrie positions simultaneously. Taman had to pull forces from the cities to respond, which made the cities harder to control. For the first time since the invasion began, the Valkyrie were reacting instead of acting. They were being forced to play defense. The battle lasted 3 days. When it was over, Colonel Deho's fleet had destroyed 12 Valkyrie ships and damaged 30 more. They had lost 8 frigates, but they had proven something important. Humans could hurt the Valkyrie. The mighty Dominion could bleed. Taman stood in his damaged headquarters reading casualty reports. He had lost 400 soldiers in 3 days. 15% of his fleet was destroyed or damaged. This was supposed to be a simple occupation, but it had turned into a nightmare. He sent a message to the Dominion High Command. "Request reinforcements." Human resistance stronger than anticipated. The response was not sympathetic. The Dominion had never needed to send reinforcements before. Tamin was told to complete his mission with existing forces, but the situation continued to deteriorate. Human resistance groups were now active on all 4 occupied worlds. Valkyrie casualties mounted daily. Supply lines were under constant attack. Soldiers became nervous and jumpy, shooting at shadows. On Earth, the Joint Chiefs studied the results of Colonel Deho's raid. They had learned valuable lessons. The Valkyrie were powerful, but they were not invincible. They could be hurt. They could be beaten. "We need more time to build up our forces," the chairman said. "The guerrilla warfare is buying us that time." "It's costing lives," another general pointed out. "Yes," Deho agreed. "But if we try to fight them head-on right now, we lose everything. This way, we have a chance. Every day they waste on occupation duty is a day we use to prepare." Sora received a new message from Earth Command. They wanted her to expand operations to make the occupation as costly as possible. They were sending more supplies, more weapons, even military advisors. She gathered her fighters around a campfire in the mountains. They were tired and dirty, and they had all lost friends. But there was something new in their eyes now. Hope. "Command says we're making a difference," she told them. "Every Valkyrie soldier we tie down here is one less soldier they can use to attack other worlds. We're buying Earth time to build a fleet that can actually fight back." One of her fighters asked, "Do you think we can win?" Sora looked at the stars above them. Somewhere up there, the Valkyrie had an empire of nearly 1,000 worlds. Humanity had 12. The odds were terrible. But she thought about the children who had died in the bombardment. She thought about her students who would never grow up. "I don't know if we can win," she said honestly, "but I know we can make them regret starting this war." Commander Taman requested permission to use orbital bombardment to destroy the resistance. He wanted to burn the forest where they hid, collapse the mountains where they sheltered. The Dominion refused. Dead worlds produce nothing. The Velkhari conquered to gain resources and slaves, not to create wastelands. He was ordered to subdue the population, not exterminate them. This was another lesson the Velkhari were learning. Commander Taman stood on the bridge of the Velkhari warship Eternal Conquest, watching the stars bend around them as they traveled faster than light. He had served the Dominion for 200 years, and in that time, he had never lost a battle. His people, the Velkhari, were the rulers of the galaxy. They were stronger, smarter, and more advanced than any other species they had encountered. 847 star systems bowed before them. Soon there would be 848. The latest target was a species called humans. They had spread across 12 systems, building colonies and talking about peace and cooperation. Taman had read the reports. Humans were weak creatures. They stood barely 2 meters tall, had thin skin that bruised easily, and their bodies wore out after only 100 years. They had primitive weapons and no unified government. Some human worlds didn't even talk to each other. It would be easy. "Commander, we are approaching the human colony of New Busan," his second officer reported. Taman nodded. "Prepare the invasion fleet. This will be over quickly." On the colony world below, Dr. Jiwon was studying alien plant samples in her laboratory. She loved her work. New Busan was a beautiful world with purple skies and 2 moons. The colony had been here for 30 years, and 20,000 people called it home. They had farms, schools, and small factories. Life was peaceful. Her computer beeped with an urgent message. She opened it and felt her blood turn cold. Unknown ships had appeared at the edge of the system. Hundreds of them. The defense satellites had tried to identify them, but the ships had destroyed the satellites with single shots. Jiwon ran outside. Other colonists were already gathering in the streets, looking up at the sky with worried faces. The planetary governor was broadcasting on all channels, telling everyone to stay calm. But Jiwon could hear the fear in his voice. Across the galaxy on Earth, Ambassador Hana sat in an emergency meeting with the United Nations Space Council. Representatives from every major Earth nation were present, along with delegates from the other human colonies. The news from New Busan had reached them through emergency faster-than-light communication. "We need to respond diplomatically," Hana insisted. "We don't know what these aliens want. Maybe this is just a misunderstanding." A military general shook his head. "Our defense network shows 400 warships. That's not a diplomatic mission. That's an invasion force." Captain Minho of the defense frigate Indomitable received his orders within the hour. He was to take his ship and 3 others to New Busan and defend the colony. He looked at his crew. They were good people, trained and ready. But his ship was designed to fight pirates and smugglers, not an alien armada. "We have our orders," he told them. "Prepare for combat operations." His crew moved quickly to their stations. Minho strapped into the captain's chair and watched the stars stretch as they entered faster-than-light travel. In his heart, he knew they were sailing toward disaster. Back at New Busan, the alien ships had entered orbit. Governor Park tried one last time to contact them. He broadcast messages in every language Earth had encountered. He offered friendship, trade, anything to avoid violence. The response came in perfect human language, cold and emotionless. "You have built colonies in territory claimed by the Velkhari Dominion. You will surrender immediately. Disarm your weapons and prepare for occupation. Resistance will result in extermination." Governor Park looked at his defense coordinator. The colony had 12 missile platforms and some fighter craft. Against 400 warships, it was nothing. But he thought about the families below, the children playing in the parks, the farmers tending their crops. "We will not surrender," he broadcast back. "This is our home." The Velkhari response was immediate. Beams of blue energy lanced down from orbit, striking the missile platforms. They exploded in brilliant flashes. Fighter craft launched from the colony's small spaceport, piloted by volunteers who knew they had no chance. They managed to damage 2 Velkhari ships before being wiped out. Jiwon watched from her laboratory as the bombardment began. Buildings exploded. The power grid failed. Fire spread through the agricultural sector. She grabbed her research data and ran for the evacuation shuttles. Thousands of colonists were trying to escape, but there weren't enough ships. Commander Taman watched the battle with satisfaction. The humans fought bravely, he would give them that. But bravery meant nothing against superior force. His fleet had barely taken any damage. In 3 hours, the colony's defenses were destroyed. "Begin landing operations," he ordered. "Take the surviving population into custody." Captain Minho and his small fleet arrived too late. They emerged from faster-than-light travel to find New Busan burning. 398 Valkyrie ships still surrounded the planet. Minho knew what he had to do. "All ships attack formation," he commanded. "We have to buy time for the evacuation shuttles." His 4 frigates charged at the massive enemy fleet. It was suicide, but it was their duty. They fired missiles and energy weapons targeting the Valkyrie landing craft. They managed to destroy 6 transport ships before the enemy responded. The Indomitable shook as enemy fire struck its shields. Minho gripped his chair as explosions rocked the ship. On his display, he watched one of his sister ships explode. Then another. "Hull breach on decks 4 and 5. His engineer shouted. "Shield generators failing. All hands, abandon ship," Minho ordered. "Get to the escape pods." His crew moved quickly, trained for this moment even though they had prayed it would never come. Minho was the last to leave the bridge. As he climbed into his escape pod, he looked back at his ship one final time. She had served them well. The pods launched just as the Indomitable exploded. Minho's pod tumbled through space, its small thrusters trying to push him away from the battle. Through the small window, he watched the last human frigate die in a ball of fire. Dr. Jiwon made it onto one of the evacuation shuttles. It was packed with colonists, far more than it was designed to carry. Children were crying. Adults held each other. The shuttle's engines roared as it climbed toward space, trying to escape before the Valkyrie noticed. They were lucky. In the chaos of the battle, the small shuttle slipped away. The pilot set course for the nearest human system, a mining colony called Armstrong Station. It would take them 3 weeks to get there on the shuttle's slow engines. As New Busan disappeared behind them, Jiwon looked at the data chip she had saved. It contained everything they had learned about the Valkyrie ships during the battle. Information about their weapons, their shields, their tactics. It wasn't much, but it might help. On Earth, Ambassador Hana received the news. New Busan had fallen. 4 frigates destroyed. Casualties estimated at 7,000. The Valkyrie had begun their occupation and were demanding the surrender of all human colonies. The Space Council chamber was silent. Everyone understood what this meant. Humanity was at war with an enemy that had never been defeated. An enemy that had conquered nearly 1,000 worlds. An enemy that had weapons and technology far beyond anything humans possessed. "What do we do?" Someone asked. Hana stood up. "We fight. We fight because we have no choice. We fight because those people on New Busan deserved better. We fight because if we don't, humanity will cease to exist." Commander Taman walked through the ruins of New Busan. His troops had secured the colony. Several thousand humans had been captured. Others had died in the bombardment or escaped on shuttles. It didn't matter. This was just the first of 12 human worlds. He would conquer them all. He had seen the 4 human ships attack his fleet. They had been brave but foolish. Courage without power was meaningless. The humans would learn this lesson. They would surrender or they would die. Every species did. The Valkyrie had been doing this for 3,000 years. As he returned to his ship, Taman was already planning the next attack. The humans had an industrial world called New Manchester. That would be his next target. He estimated it would fall within a week. He had no idea that he had just made the worst mistake of his long life. He had attacked a species that looked weak, but possessed something the Valkyrie had forgotten during their centuries of easy victory. Humans knew how to adapt. They knew how to survive. And when pushed to the edge of extinction, they knew how to fight back with everything they had. The war had begun, and nothing would ever be the same again.